So on today's episode, guys, we're going to be going over another gear reflection. This is a series where I take a look back on past guitars I have bought and sold, cover all the highlights as far as pros and cons, likes and dislikes. So if you guys run across these instruments in your search for gear, maybe this information could be useful to you. Thank you guys as always for joining me. Let's get to it. So we're going to be looking at the Washburn X50 Pro Q. This is a pretty cool, somewhat of a modern style super strat guitar. So as far as the specifications, we've got a 25.5-inch scale length. We've got a mahogany body, mahogany neck. We've got a very nice quilted maple top. It's kind of like a root beer finish, if I remember correctly. They do come in a variety of different colors as well. We've got a rosewood fingerboard, Grover tuners, 24 frets, Tune-o-matic bridge, very nice set through neck heel. This is definitely one area that does stand out. You guys know I'm big on just having a very comfortable upper fret access. I describe this neck heel as something similar to what you may find on a typical Schecter or LTD guitar. I like the headstock in this guitar. I think it definitely has a little bit of a unique character. I remember at the time my wife described it as a squirrel tail shaped headstock, so I always thought that was kind of funny. The factory Seymour Duncan pickups on this model, for whatever reason, they just had a really nice, clear sound about them, and I was very well satisfied. This was definitely an area where I felt like they had plenty of output, didn't feel like it was too far in one direction as far as being so genre specific. It's not going to be like a gent bro pickup, so you can still do a wide variety of different lighter, medium, and high gain tones, and really good possibilities as far as the pickups. I was not the biggest fan of the binding. This one did have kind of like that cream binding around the body as well as the neck. At the end of the day, like minor cosmetic things like binding, even though it's not my cup of tea, it's obviously nothing that's going to hinder the performance of the guitar. Something really nice that stood out to me on the X50 Pro Q was the quilted maple top. Because it was a carved top, it actually had a fairly thick top. So in order to shape that carved profile, you need to obviously start with a thicker piece of wood. So that was one thing that I felt like in this kind of price range was a pretty respectable feature. Now, as far as value, I bought this guitar many years back. At the time, I grabbed this thing on the old used room from a long since closed Guitar Center location for a very reasonable $299. I felt that this guitar had a lot of features, definitely provided a lot of value. Considering there's not that many things you can buy nowadays that probably would have similar features, you're probably looking around $800 to $1,200. Quality and craftsmanship, I felt like this one, again, as I've said on numerous videos, anything coming out of that World Music Factory from Korea, these guys have really perfected the process as far as just consistent production for import-made guitars. Even though this was a bit of an older model, if I recall correctly, I think it was a 2006, thinking back on the serial number. And again, I felt like it was fairly well put together. Tuning stability was good, no problems with it really at all. As far as the actual neck shape, was fairly thin. I would definitely describe that as a kind of more of a modern shredder neck. Maybe not quite as thin and flat as like an Ibanez Prestige or something along those lines, but I would say it was fairly similar to what you would find from probably like a Schecter, what they would describe as like their ultra thin C. So if you guys know me, I'm always more of a fan of those thinner necks. So yeah, it was super comfortable. So overall, definitely a lot of positive things to say about the Washburn X50 Pro Q. I definitely would consider this to be a pretty awesome beater if you're looking for something affordable. If you can find one like used, maybe it's got some scratches or dings, something that can get the job done. If you're looking for like that modern, that super strat shape, something with a great access neck heel. Now, as far as drawbacks, there's really only two particular things I could find that don't really align with my personal taste as far as guitars. First of which being this was unfortunately a gloss neck. I know a lot of people probably share the same frustration. A lot of times it feels very sticky when you play, so definitely kind of slows you down a little bit. And then secondly, because this was a carved top model, you do get that kind of hard edge just not having like a traditional, like a rounded forearm contour. So for me, that's always kind of a big thing. Just these are just things I've picked up from years of like trial and error with having different guitars. So those are kind of two things for me. I need like either a satin or a tung oil finish, and just the comfort and ergonomics of just having like that forearm and wrist contour does make a big deal. I just mentioned that just because a lot of people, myself included over the years, I might read a description or look at a picture and say, okay, carved top, in my mind, carved contour, you know, especially if a person's reading it, maybe like English is not your first language, I can understand there may be a little bit of confusion. So always bear in mind that carved top is usually not going to have the comfort of a contour. So if you're thinking about picking up one of these guitars, if you could live with those two things, I definitely think that this is a tremendous value, especially if you can find something under 500 bucks. I mean, to get equivalent features on typical like higher end import models at the present value for what these kind of things are selling for, you're probably going to be somewhere in the ballpark of around $1,000. Now, the other thing that I'll mention on this video, and that of course is what happened to Washburn Guitars. I mean, there's quite a few out there as far as like your acoustics, but if you take a look at the current time, there are very, very few models within Washburn solid body electric guitars. So if you take a look at the website, I mean, aside from like all the Nuno models, they have like a couple like really basic like Strat copies from Washburn. And outside of that, man, like that's really about it. Now, in years past, I have owned a dime Washburn 2ST. That was obviously a very special dime signature model. If you run across any of these guitars used, I mean, they're obviously selling for an arm and a leg. Just, you know, you got to factor in the dime tax and that whole situation. But really outside of that, man, there's just really not much else going on with Washburn electric guitars. I have owned some of their Parallax models they've had in years past. I felt like that was kind of a cool series. I can't say they were the best looking. There were some like aesthetic issues that just kind of were a little cheesy. Like I just felt like the finishes weren't that great. They had like this little kind of like bird like decal thing at the 12th fret. I wasn't really a big fan of that, but the Parallax series definitely had a nice assortment of features. These were fairly well equipped guitars. Again, kind of lacking in the cosmetic department. I felt like the styling really was not the best, but I thought they were pretty interesting, and I did think that there was potential, but that series obviously is no more. It is kind of a bummer just thinking about the current situation, you know, with Washburn. I don't know like what their game plan is. If maybe they're kind of focusing on just sticking to just that one series with the Nuno guitars. Maybe they just have those couple price point ones just to offer something. But I feel like they kind of need to revitalize the product lineup just to see if we could sort of broaden the horizon a little bit. But I don't know. Maybe they're just going to be a dying brand, and we're just going to have to see what the future holds. I'll be sure to keep my eyes open. If I see any future updates, I'll be sure to share them on the channel. So that's my experience with the X Series X50 Pro Q. Hopefully I said that right. If you find one of these floating around used somewhere, you can grab one at a bargain. Pretty good option if you're looking for a nice assortment of value in a modern S-type guitar. Those are my thoughts, guys. Thank you so much for joining me for another installment on our gear reflection series. Be sure to leave a comment in the comment section down below. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Have a great day.